everybody.
Twig. Look at us. Look at this. We're
I know.
all grown up. We're all grown up.
God.
Welcome to Twig and Jenkins. We are in a new bomb-ass studio here in Washington, D.C., and we're doing it because we got a big interview, and we're doing a remote patch-in interview with our guy, Ben Wickler, running for DNC chair. We are continuing. This is our third interview of DNC chair candidates. Carrie Twig, how do we feel? First off, how do we feel about this studio?
Oh,
Because
this is really slick.
this is
really classing it up from real humble beginnings a couple months ago.
from our Zooms.
From our Zooms, our FaceTimes, our drunken shenanigans at the convention. This feels very profesh.
This feels very profesh. This is something that you are used to, though, but I don't know that.
But being on the other side of,
Yeah.
you know, like we'll book stuff in like film and places like this, but I'm not the person on camera.
Sure. We've talked to two candidates so far.
Yep.
I would say that Ben, who we're about to speak with, is perhaps the front runner.
Interesting.
I think
Interesting take.
this is my take. I mean, one, he's probably the most well-known publicly. Do you disagree?
I do, but I was going to let you finish.
Well, I mean, among Democratic, I mean, if we're talking about, you know, the DNC and the elites and folks like
The people who vote. If we're talking
yes.
about the people who vote, I don't think he's the front runner. I think,
interesting.
yeah.
I think Ken is the front runner.
I think Ken's probably the front runner.
Okay.
Simply because the depth of his relationships and the breadth of his relationships, being such a party insider for so long,
Sure.
Are really intense. Like people have known him for I've known of him for a long time.
Sure.
So, but I think you're right in that I think Ben's the momentum candidate. I think that Ben is doing all the right things. His appearance on The Daily Show is really good. I think he's being really smart about how he's campaigning, and there's 55 days left. So
Yeah.
that Ken might not be the front runner for long, but I think in the 2 weeks it's been, or the 10 days it's been since people announced, he was sort of the obvious one to be able to roll out a handful of endorsements.
Very good point. I guess I'll take back what I said. I would say Ben is the public-facing front runner.
Yeah.
Ben
Exactly.
is on The Daily Show.
Yeah.
Ben is on the Chuck Todd podcast. Ben is on the Twig and Jenkins podcast. Let's fucking go. And he's been excellent. I think he's been an excellent spokesperson for what is working, particularly in the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin was a state, yes, Kamala Harris lost in, but Tammy Baldwin won in Wisconsin. There were a lot of big races in Wisconsin.
And I think it was the closest battleground margin, right?
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
Listen, I will say, I've said many times on the podcast that I think we need a show pony.
Yeah.
I've keep trying to make Jasmine Crockett happen.
It's like Fetch. It's just,
I know. I keep trying to make Fetch happen. It's an idea that isn't getting caught. It's not catching on in the way that I would like. And that I very much have said that I think Ben or Ken or one of these guys would be an amazing ED. Like, don't forget that is the most powerful actual Democrat in the country. I will say I was really blown away by Ben's appearance on The Daily Show, so I'm really looking forward to talking to him. I think he might be much more of a show pony than I anticipated him being. So I'm super looking forward to it.
He comes across very authentic. He's not someone who is just giving you talking points.
Right.
I think it's coming from being on the front lines, right? This is someone who's been running the Wisconsin State Democratic Party at a time where, to be honest, like they needed new leadership. He's been there for 6 years, but think about all of the fights with Governor Walker, all of the anti-union work that was happening in Wisconsin, stripping away workers' rights. Ben came in at a point where
that was
Wisconsin. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wisconsin, I think the fact that now it is has not gone the way of Ohio, for instance. Like that
I don't know why you just did that. I really don't.
Look, just gonna say it. Just gonna go in on it. No, but there's a world where, Wisconsin, with where it was 10
Totally.
years
No,
ago
you're right. You're right.
and where it is now.
It's not undeserved. It just hurt,
The youths call it Ohio for a reason, Twig. Don't be Ohio, Twig. Don't be Ohio. We're gonna pull up Ben in a second, but what do you want to hear from him that maybe wasn't touched on in the Daily Show, which was a great interview? I agree.
I'm really curious from a nuts and bolts perspective. One of the things we haven't heard is how are you going to manage this thing? The actual organization
True.
is a kind of unwieldy beast. And yes, you can fire everybody and then rebuild it. Fine. But what are the departments? Who are the people? How are you actually going to organize the party so that all the work that has to be done that we've enumerated multiple times actually gets done? We have to rebuild a communication infrastructure. We have to do meaningful organizing. We have to do fundraising. We have to build up state infrastructure and state parties. We have to recruit candidates. We have to deploy all the people who are already in the party that are extraordinarily talented around a media ecosystem and around a national sort of fundraising ecosystem. We have to do the nuts and bolts, super technical back end of the data and the analytics.
Yeah.
There's so much. You have to rebuild the brand and do all the brand work. All that stuff. That is so much work.
Yep.
And
it requires a shit ton of money.
Requires a ton of cash.
Yep.
And a lot of people. And the reason there's always so much work for them to do, which I think is how we got so over sort of leveraged by consultants.
Yeah.
And so what's going to be...
Ooh, bring up that.
Yeah.
Bring up
so
the consultant class.
Because theoretically we think that they're cheaper.
Yeah.
Than having in-house staff that you have to give benefits to and talk to and manage, right? And then hire people to manage. So I'm just sort of from a former staffer perspective, how are you actually going to run this organization?
Yeah. I'm with you. I think that my other question will be around the brand. And one thing I agree with you that among the DNC members is very well known, and that's really important. But for me, what's more important is the external public facing building the brand. So I definitely want to ask him about that. Well, we should just get into it. What do we think, Twig?
Let's do it.
Should we call him up? Should we pull him up?
Hello.
There he is.
Right. Ben Wickler, chair of the Wisconsin Dems. I love this. It's so great to meet you.
It's great to be with you today. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. How's the campaign trail going? You are a candidate for DNC chair. You're in the thick of the race.
It's good. This is a micro race. We have 51 days until February 1st, and then we'll have our new DNC chair. And it's off to the races for 4 years of nonstop intensity to try to contain the damage of Trump and actually elect Democrats up and down the ballot to make a difference in people's lives. So that is, this is the race to start the race for the real fight.
When did you make the decision to run for chair?
A couple weeks ago. The election was totally all-consuming, especially in Wisconsin, which is one of the hardest fought battleground states in the country. And we were fighting all the way until the last polling places closed on election night. And then the ballot started rolling in, and I felt good because I'd seen so much energy on our side, and it wasn't wrong. We did add votes in most counties in the state and statewide for Harris relative to Biden, but Trump added even more votes. And so, late at night, we realized that we were going to lose Wisconsin. We were going to lose the election. I went to bed with a pit in my stomach. I woke up the next day and started digging through the data and realizing that what we had done in Wisconsin did make a difference. It's just that we were running uphill in the middle of a landslide. So we won our U.S. Senate race. We flipped 14 state legislative races. And then the next day, I started getting calls from people saying, you should think about running for DNC. So it took a couple of weeks to really think it through. This is not something, I haven't been running for this office for years. I've been focused on the fight in a state that is often tipped, the whole country. But I came to feel like the kind of year-round campaign, the kind of unity in the party and focus in red, purple, and blue areas that we've done in Wisconsin, and a lot of the work to communicate with people who don't pay attention to politics, that can make a difference nationally. And I'm running for DNC chair to try to unite the party to fight in every state up and down the ballot and win a lot more elections.
Go ahead. You want to go in there, Brad?
I do.
Get in there.
What was in the water, Ben Wickler? I know how much you've been working. You've been at this in Wisconsin for 6 years. But what was in the water in Wisconsin that we were not drinking in the rest of the country? Because let's just be clear, Kamala Harris lost every single battleground state, right? You are running to take the helm of a Democratic National Committee that, we're on a sports studio set. If we were Stephen A. Smithing it, Ben Wickler, we would call that a blowout, right? Because the way that the game is scored is, did you win the battleground state or did you lose the battleground state? The Kamala Harris campaign, the Joe Biden campaign, former to that, the DNC, which was in charge of getting ready, gearing up to win those battleground states, lost every one. How do you diagnose it? You're now coming in. You're like Bill Belichick, Ben. Or I guess you're a Packers fan, probably. Are you a Packers fan?
Packers fan.
There we go.
Absolutely.
There we go.
Shareholder.
So you're taking over. You're like the GM and the head coach. How do you diagnose how we got our asses kicked? And how do we fix it?
So,
what's the team that we're assembling?
Well, the biggest thing that jumps out is that we lost, for the first time in my life, the majority of people making less than $50,000 a year.
Yeah.
And if you talk to those voters, a lot of them, they're not watching MSNBC or are listening to NPR. They're not tuning into traditional news at all. And we lost by 16 points among people who say they never pay attention to political news. We won by 8 points among people who say they always pay attention to political news. And that means to me, we have to think not just about message, but about messenger and about medium, about going where voters are in a country where attention is totally fragmented. This is not like, three national news networks has been for a half century. And it means thinking about building up a kind of the progressive media ecosystem and allied media ecosystem. It means going into spaces that the right dominates now, where people only get news about Democrats from Republicans. It means going to places that are not politically focused and building relationships with influencers, with people who have influence. And it means organizing in a way that is bottom up, neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend, because trust is the thing that has corroded the most. And people who don't want anyone to believe anything is real, who want people to think every politician is corrupt, right now they're kind of dominating the conversation, especially with a lot of working voters. So Democrats believe fundamentally that we should be a country that fights for working people, that works for working people, and where everyone should have the kind of freedom and dignity that should be every person's birthright. And yet, if nobody hears that message, or if they only hear it and think that it's all a bunch of talk and not real, then we're going to keep losing elections. And this year, I think we saw what it looks like when that doesn't break through. And we saw it, frankly, in every Western democracy in the world. The incumbent parties lost ground because people felt like they were taking it on the chin with higher prices. If we have plans that bring costs down and bring wages up and empower people to fight and join unions, and we're not able to communicate them, all the plans in the world won't make the difference. So that is the change that we need, is to show up where people get their trusted information and walk the walk to make the case that we're on the side of working folks.
Ben, you're speaking my language. I'm a former state party staffer, DNC staffer, did unions for the Obamas in the White House for many years, and now I make film and television. So you hit a lot.
You're blown out with Twig right now. You said all the right words.
You're hitting a lot of my favorite
on
talking
her bingo
points
board
that I want to hear. Absolutely.
Well, thanks for that service, Twig. And I will say, there are people who've been doing this work and people who've been advocating for this strategy for a while. But it is sometimes you need a little shock to the system to really open up a new path. And I think we've had that shock, and we got to go down that path now.
Amazing. So one of the things I want to ask you about, and again, this comes from my perspective. I worked for the Ohio Democratic Party for many years before being a DNC staffer. And my very first job, I think it was the deputy political director of the state party, my very first job at the state party, half of my salary was paid by the DNC. This is the 50-state strategy of the Dean era. And so I got 2 paychecks. One was from the ODP, one was from the DNC. I mean, altogether it amounted to $25,000 a year. So but it's a different time, it really, in today's money, it'd be like 30. So, but that was the DNC putting money into the state party enabled it to have this kind of cadre of young organizers who then enabled us to do an 88 county strategy in Ohio. So I would love to hear a little bit just from your experience on the ground in states about what infrastructure you think we need to be putting in place in a 365 manner to make sure that we are picking up legislative races, that we are winning in judicial races, that we do have a farm team at every single level. And so, whether that's candidates, whether that's organizers, whether that's media infrastructure, or even tech infrastructure. I mean, I think we have a lot we need to improve from our tech infrastructure. I'd just love to hear about your experience on the state level and how it translates.
Absolutely. So there are 3,244 counties in this country. You need a 3,244 county strategy, a 57 state party strategy. There's Dems abroad, there's the territories in every state. But to me, the key thing is it's all the states and it's a strategy in each one. And you put the resources behind the strategy that allows you to win as much as possible. So that's going to, some places, we have to focus on winning mayorships and county offices. Some places it's breaking a Republican supermajority in the state legislature. Sometimes it's winning a trifecta. We can flip governorships. There's places that are really blue where there's still red House districts that we can flip. You figure out where are the fights that you need to lean into, and you build a battle plan around those in partnership with those on the front lines on the ground who have the clearest sense of what the battle lines are. And in Wisconsin, that's informed year-round permanent campaign. So we work in spring elections. We have a state Supreme Court race coming up. This is a perfect example. After November, we didn't pack up everything and go down to 3 staff. We have dozens of people right now preparing to make sure Susan Crawford beats Brad Schimmel, the Republican-backed guy in the state Supreme Court race that'll determine the majority. And in fights like that, go back to North Carolina Supreme Court race in 22. If we hadn't lost the majority in the Supreme Court there, Republicans wouldn't have re-gerrymandered the state, and Democrats would have a national U.S. House majority right now.
Right.
And knowing those fights that have long-term consequences, like Wisconsin Supreme Court race does now, and so many other races across the country, allows us to focus our energy on the things that are going to make the biggest difference for the long term. Now, there's a lot of pieces to this, and some of that is going to be, significantly increased funding to support that work through the state parties and in partnership with state parties across the country. Some of it is building national technology capacity that then we're able to train folks to be able to use in their states. Some of that is training communicators and doing a lot of training to make sure that in states and nationally that we are, as we talked about, having great messengers who show up where the voters are actually paying attention. There used to be training programs for pundits to go on Fox News. I went through that program, the Franklin Forum, and it was great. And then I went on Fox a lot and did battle with the far right. But a lot of that doesn't exist right now. And there's also a lot of places that we have never built an operation to be able to go into. All of this, to me, comes from having this orientation that it's not enough to just do more of what we've done before. We need to be ready to do new things. An experimentation, kind of taking risks, trying stuff to see what works mentality. And a lot of times you can try something in one place and apply it somewhere else. And in Wisconsin, we've done exactly this. We started using relational friend-to-friend organizing tools, an app called Reach that I used when I ran for state party chair. And then we made it a big part of our operation. And then ultimately the Biden and then Harris campaign adopted it as their relational platform nationwide. And we were able to be a test case to see how it would work. And we found that more than half the voters we reached were people who were not yet registered, but who were interested and wanted to be engaged through that program. There's so much to do when you kind of open the floodgates to innovation and recognize that just doing the same thing is a path to having the same results. So I think this is a kind of across the board, all the above operational moment. And in Wisconsin, we've demonstrated the impact that can have, because we added votes in rural counties and in suburbs and in the big urban counties and in small towns. We have a presence everywhere. We dominate the social media conversation in our state. We've shifted how politics work from total right-wing control and domination to being a real fight and a democracy. And that is what our country needs right now.
Ben, I appreciate you hitting the road. I saw you on The Daily Show, by the way. Well done. With
yeah,
Jon
you were
Stewart.
great.
You were phenomenal.
Thank you.
It's something, Twig and I we've been doing our own version of Monday quarterbacking, not to keep using sports metaphors, on, what we would like to see out of a DNC chair. And the thing that I'm struck by is we've got incredible, you mentioned it, incredible communicators already. You've got your AOCs, you've got your Elizabeth Warrens, you've got your Jasmine Crockett's, you've got your Mayor Pete's, and people love those guys. But then if you were to ask people, particularly young people, what do you think about the Democratic Party brand? The answer is always negative.
If there's an answer at all.
If there's an answer
come up with anything.
If there's an answer at all.
Right.
And what we found, and we looked at the data, what we found, our guy Tom Bonnier pointed this out, young people are registering not as Democrats. They're just registering as independents. Our party brand is just shit. Excuse my language. How do we change that? How do we start to, hug our friends like Bernie Sanders, who doesn't even consider himself a Democrat, but that young people love? How do we start to, I feel like the Democratic Party needs a rebrand. And I think that starts with the job that you're running for, Ben.
So I think that people form their associations with a brand like what the Democratic Party is through the actual fights that they see us wage.
Yes.
That you can talk about what your principles are. That is great. But the real test is when when the rubber meets the road or something hits the fan or whatever phrase you want to use, where do you stand and what do you do? I think that when Republicans came for healthcare in 2017, Democrats united in fury and organized in partnership with tens of thousands, millions of people to fight for this idea that you should be able to get a doctor when you're sick and we should not be stripping healthcare away from tens of millions of people. And that built our brand as a party, as the party that actually cares about whether folks can get the healthcare that they need or whether they should be abandoned and forced into bankruptcy if they have a medical emergency. And I think we build our brand through the fights that we fight. So that to me is the core thing for the next 4 years. You have to walk the walk and then you have to talk the talk. I think Democrats sometimes have this problem that we only walk the walk and we don't actually explain what we're doing and narrate what we're doing and narrate what the other side is doing in a way that uses language and clarity and visual communication to make it vivid. But when we do fight those fights, people do remember that. And if you think about like the 2018 midterms, Republicans started to try to sound like Democrats. They were talking about pre-existing conditions because they knew that they were taking it on the chin. And I think the same thing with abortion bans. Democrats are very clear that we think it's a fundamental freedom. You should be able to control your own body. And Republicans, Trump ran screaming from his own party's position because he knew it would be politically toxic if the Republicans were branded as the party that tried to take that freedom away. So we should be on offense on things that are deeply uniting and popular, that are at the core of what our values are, which is a country that works for working people, where everyone has freedom and dignity and opportunity and respect. And when we do fight those fights and make clear that we're doing that as Democrats and not just run against the Democratic Party, I think that's how we rebuild. I agree. We have a deep brand problem. And there's not some set of magic words that changes it.
Yeah.
You have to actually demonstrate to people that you are shoulder to shoulder with them, even at cost to your party, even at the cost of losing elections, that you're going to fight for a set of principles that is something that they really care deeply about. And then the other piece of this is you have to be effective, because if you fight and lose every time, that's something else that people don't like about Democrats, is this sense that Democrats,
Losers,
even if they have good intentions, that they're just going to lose. They trip over their own shoelaces. Like that sense of ineffectiveness is also, I think, a big problem, especially with young people. So it is, you have to unite around those values. You have to fight the fight, and then you have to win, which happens to be my platform as a DNC chair. Unite, fight, win.
It.
That is how you change people's perceptions of this party.
The other thing I would add to that is also the cultural piece. I mean, when you have young athletes doing the Trump dance in the end zone, when you have the fact that the Republicans have done such a good job and MAGA's done such a good job of sort of capturing a feeling that to support Donald Trump is subversive and cool, and like that is the counterculture. That's such a powerful thing. That was ours. That was Democrats from the 60s up until basically Obama. And we've completely lost that sort of cool factor that I think that, like, listen, Americans, we are fantastic and simple creatures. And it's like, we like cool shit, right? Like Americans, especially young people, I like cool shit. I don't want to be lame, you know? And so I think that we need to figure out how to better use culture. And it's not shiny superstar celebrities up on a stage far away from us. It's like being down in the making of the thing with people.
It's Ben Wickler on the Twig and
Jenkins.
It's Ben Wickler on the Twig.
That's what it is.
That's
culture.
Really Twig and Jenkins.
That's culture.
I have a quick.
So emphatically.
Sorry,
Oh, can I want to just chime in with emphatic agreement. The cringe factor is very real, and there's a we can fall into the trap of just repeating cultural things that happened 40 years ago that resonate with certain folks. I think that the key thing is to take ourselves less seriously and take voters more seriously.
Yes.
Like so often we are, being super, super careful about exactly how we frame things for, coalitional reasons. But like, let's like take our kind of self-regard down a notch and also show that we actually do deeply care about what is happening in the lives of voters and working people across this country. And if we're fighting for them and we're not just defending ourselves, then I think that allows us to relax a little bit and let our hair down and have fun with this. Because this is a giant rollicking battle that is, I think there's a lot of joy to be had. And what Republicans are doing is often both disastrous and hilarious. And letting ourselves point that out. Humor is on our side. And most comedians agree with us politically because they can see that what Republicans are trying to do is so preposterous. And being willing to take a little bit of heat ourselves without getting in a twist about it, I think is essential to actually connecting with voters who think that politics in general is a joke. And if we're in on the joke, we have a much better chance to be able to earn some trust about the real fight.
Yeah, totally. It's such a good point. Okay, so you've outlined a lot of work, right? There's a lot that the DNC needs to do. We need to, from a technical perspective, from an operational perspective, from a culture and messaging perspective, then recruit candidates, then to raise money, then to sort of diagnose where we're actually at, get everyone on the same page and move forth and prosper. That's a lot of work. And I think often when organizations have a lot of work ahead of them, this is really where consultants come in and swoop up because it just becomes so hard to build a team that can do all of that work. We've obviously, my opinion, I don't think it's very spicy of one, is that the party and the campaigns have been so captured by consultants who have not been on the ground for a really long time, who are not actually deeply entrenched in the industries with an expertise that is required so often. Don't get me wrong. I have a lot of friends that are consultants. I've been a consultant. I get it. And yet I think we often, instead of building organizations because it's unwieldy to have 50 staff or 75 staff or 100 staff, it's also expensive. We just sort of farm out a bunch of work and labor to consultants who aren't as deeply motivated or integrated or compelled by all the things that need to happen, have a bunch of different clients that they're servicing, right? How are you, if you're chair, going to build the Democratic Party in a way that doesn't repeat the mistake we saw on the campaign of so much work being sort of outsourced to consultants who don't then work well as an organization and share information and sort of operate in an elegant way?
Yeah. The core is you've got to have a team of really talented people that can do a ton of stuff in-house, not in a way that maximizes profit, but in a way that maximizes impact. Yeah. So in Wisconsin, we have a candidate services team that helps local candidates for state legislature and for school board design their mail, write their campaign plan, figure out their universe of voters, set up their website. We do that for free because we can do it really cheaply, and it is the total waste of money for all these local candidates to be hiring, teams of consultants to work on races that target a few thousand people. Yeah. And I think that there's principles like that, building tools, building capacity within state parties to be able to provide that kind of support. It's a lot of in-housing of work where there's returns to scale. So you can actually do more for more people for less money if you build an operation that can do that. And there's a lot of work to do, out there. There's going to be lots of different places we have to communicate. So I think, I think that we're going to have to kind of build bigger and stronger. But to me, the core question should always not be, What is the political relationship that might be endangered if a consultant's contract isn't renewed? The core question is, how do we win this election? How do we get the work done that we need to do? And a lot of that has to be building the kind of organizational strength and capacity nationally and in state parties around the country to be able to work with our partners and allies to win. So that is the core of my orientation. That's exactly what we've done in Wisconsin to a degree that I think goes beyond what we've seen in state parties and other places. And that's been essential to how we've been able to win elections, even in really tough environments over these last 6 years. And we're now on a path to being a blue trifecta state in Wisconsin after dipping into red state territory and having a total Republican lock on our state. I think the experience of that, walking that journey, demonstrates the impact that doing this right can have.
That's
Last
amazing.
Last question.
Can
Ben.
I just say?
Go ahead.
Can I
Yeah,
just
sorry.
say that is because I don't think the answer is no consultants. You're going to have consultants. There's always a time and place for them, but it also is about building up the talent of people who can build this infrastructure, who can go run campaigns, and leveraging economies of scale around like websites. Why would you ever, all these things? I love that answer. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
All right, take us home.
So good.
Thank you.
Sorry, Twig. I'm getting fired up because I know you got a busy day here, Ben, and we know you're going to move on and do some other stuff today. I have to ask the question because I am probably not a surprise, Ben. I can't stand the punditry. I just can't stand it. And now here we are. Twig and I are now sort of wannabe pundits. But the thing that just was driving me up the wall was this idea that the reason why Democrats lost was because we were, quote unquote, too woke, right? And that simultaneously, Kamala Harris wasn't progressive enough, or Kamala Harris should have done this and should have done that. And what do you make of this? And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Twig and I feel like there is this false choice, right? Where we somehow have to stop talking about issues that communities of color care about, and we somehow only need to start talking about, quote unquote, the economy, as if the economy does not affect every single person in this country. How do we do both? And we know that the Democratic Party is a big party. We know that there's a lot of fights. We know that Gaza was very important for millions and millions of young people, particularly on college campuses. As a DNC chair, how do we build a party that brings everyone in? Because I feel like we are fractured now more than perhaps I've ever seen in my adult lifetime.
We feel fractured, and there are people trying to hammer a chisel into those fractures and pound them in to break us apart. And I think it starts with recognizing that the right ran an identity politics campaign in this election. They weaponized MAGA identity politics. That was their strategy.
Yes.
Their strategy was to try to divide us and to find the most vulnerable groups and break them off and turn folks against them and make voters, across race and ethnicity and gender and geography and sexual orientation and gender identity, to make voters think that Democrats were only concerned about someone else, not about you, that Democrats were obsessed with these divisions.
Yes.
And that was why they were using 5-year-old video clips to try to make their case. The Harris campaign was focused on big uniting messages. And the thing that's so striking to me is we did better in the places where the Republicans campaigned the most and where we campaigned the most than we did in places where neither side campaigned. And that says something about whether our message actually made a difference. They ran $100 million in homophobic and anti-trans ads against Tammy Baldwin, and she won in Wisconsin. She won re-election to the U.S. Senate this year. And our message is that Republicans are trying to divide us, and we're trying to bring our country together so that everyone can have an economy that works for them, so they can actually afford to keep a roof over their head and food on their table. And that we're not going to shrink from the idea that everyone should have freedom and dignity and respect. And those things, they're actually really popular. I think that as Democrats, we should not get confused. The people we lost the most with, and this is across race and ethnicity and across geography, it's folks who were not hearing much from either campaign, but who experienced the support they got financially during the pandemic slip away at the same time as prices jumped up.
Right.
So they felt like suddenly the bottom was falling out while the costs were rising, and they voted for change, and they didn't hear and internalize from Democrats that we could bring the kind of change that they needed, and that is the central thing for us to be able to address. But those folks were not hearing the debates on on cable TV about Republicans constantly talking about pronouns. There are a lot of people, there are non-binary people, and that is a reality. And there are Republicans who find that infuriating, and people across the political spectrum who find that kind of conversation infuriating. And those people already all basically know which party they're voting for.
Yeah.
The biggest challenge is for people who feel like they are not being seen and heard in our elections, and that neither party is speaking to them, and maybe Democrats are thinking about someone else, and showing those voters that we're going to show up and fight for them. And again, this is across race and ethnicity, across our full coalition, that we're going to fight for working people and actually make a difference and stop those that are trying to rig the system so they can prey on people. If we can make that connection, then we can move past the Republican attempt to try to divide us and chop us up. That has to be the central driving force in our work. And guess what? It actually is, because we care about making a difference in people's lives. That's why we work in politics. That's why I work in politics.
Yeah.
And I think that when we show that through the way that we fight, we're going to bring folks together and be able to win elections.
Boom.
Woo! Ben, you got me fired up over here, man. You got me fired up. How many days left? You said 50 days left to the election?
We got, I think it's 51 today. I should double check my calendar.
All right.
Well, best of luck, man. And, you've got fans here at Twigg and Jenkins. We're interviewing all the DNC chair candidates. Very, very sports style. We're going to grade people.
I don't know why you tell everyone.
Yeah, no, we're going to have, attributes. Ben Wikler's got a great arm, but he's got to work on his mobility. You know what I mean? No, I'm kidding. Again, first off, just a huge thank you, Ben, because I think your work in Wisconsin has been inspiring to everyone across the country. And already, I think you're giving us some hope with this DNC chair race. So thank you for what you're doing. And we hope to have you back on, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate the chance to join you. I love that you're talking to everybody, and I look forward to staying in touch and hopefully getting to join you as the DNC chair to
Let's
talk
go.
about
I like it.
Yeah, man.
Awesome,
We love
Ben.
that.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Good luck today.
All right.
Have a
Thank
good
you so
one,
much. Appreciate it.
We're back. We're back at Twigg and Jenkins. Look at us, Twigg and Jenkins, seated side by side. This is a new vibe for us.
I know.
Because we've got one of our favorite guests on Twigg and Jenkins back on the pod, the incomparable, the professorial, Brad
Miami
Bauman,
legend.
The Miami legend. No socks in 30-degree weather.
It's crazy.
Brad is back on the scene.
Always Miami up here.
Let's
this.
go.
This is just the way we roll.
Let's go.
Hi, it's good to be back with you both.
We're so excited. Twigg was telling me you guys were chatting DNC chair race and you have some thoughts. And we're like, let's fucking go.
Absolutely.
We need some color commentary.
Totally.
We
That's
need
right.
some real talk on the moment.
Absolutely.
So tell us, how are you feeling?
And for context, we are interviewing all the DNC chair candidates.
Excellent.
And we're going to Brad's ultimate vision of turning this into a sports podcast is going to be realized, because we're going to then rate all of the candidates.
We're going to rank them. Yeah.
He's working on graphics. It's a whole thing. It's all very...
It's going to be like a selection show, like the NCAA playoff selection.
Okay, this is...
And so if you have categories by which we can judge these people, please feel free to spit out any...
I mean, right now you have me thinking I need to start an offshore bank account so I can actually get a betting ring.
There you go.
And then we can really monetize.
Will DraftKings
little
take some
draft
bets on the DNC chair race?
Draft chairs.
Yeah.
It could be just called draft chairs. Let's just do this.
It's great. It's so good. But tell us how you're feeling.
Yeah,
Brad.
I feel like we are in an existentially threatened moment.
Yeah.
As a party. A lot of the structural deficiencies and things that I think a lot of us have been kind of charting for the last couple of years, I think have really manifested this time around. We have an opportunity, and we've had an opportunity to kind of see pretty much a whole host of strategies and tactics that we've employed as a party since basically Citizens United 20 years ago that continue to weaken our ability to talk as a brand, to explain what a Democrat is. And when you take those strategies and tactics and also put it into a media environment where so much of the country kind of lives in a conservative media bubble in which the background noise of life is Fox News and Democrats are terrible, those two things have kind of combined to make us wholly ineffective.
Yeah.
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 Is that why we lost so badly?
I think it's part of the reason we lost.
Yeah.
You
what
know,
are the other reasons? Do you want to name names?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to name names.
Can you start
Why not?
alphabetically? No.
Why
Yeah,
not?
no
There's
joke.
only-
I mean, we could go with a staff list. No, to be very, very clear on this, the folks who ran that campaign know what was wrong inside of that campaign. And,
Yeah.
you know, Carrie, I mean, you spent a lot of time in Pennsylvania. I think you know a lot about what worked and what did not work on that campaign.
Yeah.
I think it would be wise for them to start leveling with a lot of people who really want to know what the hell happened, take a little bit of accountability, and actually just say, like, here's where we messed up. Here's also where the environment was just brutal. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got a lot of respect. I have a lot of empathy for a group of folks who were basically told, here's $1 billion, here's 110 days,
Let it rip.
go,
Yeah.
just
Go.
go, right?
Go.
But like, that can't be your excuse for why we lost.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody knows who Donald Trump is.
Yes.
Everybody knows what we were up against, and everybody knew what the stakes were in this race.
Yes.
And folks have got to be honest about the roles that they played in trying to win or being a part of this loss, so that at least everyone who's watching or everyone who is a part of this broader political ecosystem that we're in can say, man, maybe we're learning.
Yes.
Maybe we're taking lessons. Maybe we're not just going to do the same damn thing in 2 years that led us down this road in the first place.
Well, no, what kills me, speaking of cable news, I turned on MSNBC last night, and they had multiple people, and I don't want to name names, just keep repeating this thing. It wasn't a landslide. It wasn't a landslide. Trump barely won. It wasn't a landslide. And I'm like, what? Why? I guess the first question is, why do you keep saying that?
Right.
What is the point of you saying that?
Honestly, yeah.
Like, what's the point? Secondly, that's just fucking wrong.
Yeah.
We lost every single battleground state. We're on like a sports studio set. If this was like if we were reporting this, like Stephen A.
100%.
We lost every single battleground state. So you can't say it wasn't a landslide.
We didn't just lose every single battleground state. If you look at how we underperformed in blue states, my God, look at what happened in California.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's pants shittingly scary.
Yes. Yes.
This is not
Yes.
it wasn't a landslide. This is okay, fine. I'll even give into the conceit. Let's give into the conceit for a second that this wasn't a landslide. Well, it is a back to ground zero moment.
100%.
Yeah.
It is a fundamental, we need to rethink everything moment.
Yes.
It is a, why is it that we have such, why is it that our policies on the one hand are so popular and win ballot initiatives 60, 70, 80%,
Yeah.
but then most of the country cannot, it turns their stomach to even think about voting for a Democrat. What does that mean? And what are we doing wrong? And guess what? The answer is we're doing a whole lot wrong.
We're doing a whole lot wrong. And so, I'll answer my own question now. This is what I do. The reason why people keep saying it wasn't a landslide is because those people want to remain in power and they want to say things are not as bad as you think that they are.
Right.
Right? Like that is
That's
the
right.
reason why.
No, that's right.
And to your point, I think that we have to keep pressing, and this is the reason why the DNC chair race is so important.
Absolutely.
Because what we don't want, and I think that, Twig and I, we've interviewed now 3 candidates, And I think that they've all been pretty level set and pretty clear-eyed that there does need to be, Governor O'Malley was referring to a turnaround, right? Like we gotta rebuild this thing, right? Even Ben, who we just spoke to, we got to turn this thing around. So that's good.
Yeah.
I think but that needs to, all of us need to be on the same page. This is the problem.
Right.
Or the challenge with the Democratic Party. We all have to be in agreement that we gotta, in Twigg's words, we gotta get down to the studs here.
100%. And, we've had to do that for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think...
it's been overdue.
Yeah.
Yeah, way overdue. And I think that a lot of us probably have never felt more empowered to talk about doing it than we do now.
Yeah.
Because you both have been doing this a long time. I've been doing this a long time. I've been waiting the better part of my adult life for this party to start acting like a party. And I've given 25 years at this point to a career that has had a lot of fulfilling moments, and I've been able to create a lot of great change, and I've been able to do a lot of things that have made people's lives better. But at the same time, I think you both know we fight with one hand tied behind our back. And at a moment where, quite frankly, our party and democracy itself could very well have irreparable damage done to it over the next 4 years.
Yeah.
We need to fight for this. It's not just going to happen. Wins don't just happen.
Yeah.
We have to fight for it. We have to fight for it every single day. And to your point about this DNC race being so important, it starts from that position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The person who inhabits that position needs to be a wartime conciliary.
Yeah.
Period. Dot. End of discussion. We don't have time for equivocators. We don't have time for folks who are aloof. We don't have time for folks that are not, that don't understand this moment in time, don't understand populism, don't understand how scared people are, how angry people are, how worried people are, and can't communicate with them in a way that's going to create trust with the party brand.
Yeah. I mean, say less. And I think something else that you're talking about, and it's so fascinating to me that Brad and I are like, A, have a podcast, B, are covering the DNC chairs race. But I think it speaks to the fact of a couple different things. One is that we're the grown-ups now in so many ways, in a way that I think, like, I sort of blacked out my mid-30s. So because of like the pandemic and I was just like, how I'm like 32, I'm like 33. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not. And so actually taking accountability and self-responsibility for, I'm a grown up. I have this long career. Right. I actually have a 20-year career in this industry. I have a ton of things that I can say and the expertise to back them up, and have built myself to a place where I'm not as beholden. Like I'm not beholden to the DNC for work.
Yeah,
I'm not beholden to any of these consultants, any of the people who ran the campaign. So I can speak freely and use that position, that privilege, in order to say things that like might not make me super popular and might not get me on the Christmas party invite list. But I don't care.
Absolutely.
And there need to be, I think it's kind of that growing pain of like, oh, right, it's on us now to figure this out. And like, we're 40 something, we're, late 30s, 40s into the 50s. It's like, it's our time. And we keep, I think the party is still oriented to the generation above us.
Precisely.
And it's time for us to sort of take it back and be like, no. You all ran the show when you were in your 40s. You were all, when you were our age, you guys were at the forefront of these massive decisions. And it's time for like that to move on.
You are so spot on. It gives me chills. I'm serious. I mean, this is our problem. This is our problem to solve. This is our generation's problem to solve. And,
also, our generation was the only generation that nailed it.
Fact.
Millennials.
Fact.
God bless fucking millennials.
Fact.
So, yeah.
No, 100% correct. And, it's scary for the generation just ahead of us who don't want to give up the reins of power. It's absolutely pants-shittingly frightening for us as well. But we can't just sit around and wait for somebody to have an answer. One of the terrible lessons that I feel like I learned during the first Trump go round was that nobody was actually in charge.
Right? Isn't that like the worst realization of adulthood?
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, no one is in charge.
Yeah.
There is not, you cannot wait for, and if you have an idea, you cannot wait.
That's right.
I've been in LA for the last, working in film and TV for the last 6-7 years. And I kept being like, I'm sure someone in politics is paying attention to culture. Like, certainly someone in DC, like someone's going to integrate this into the campaign.
No.
Surely at the White House, they're thinking about how you leverage culture. Surely they understand where people are getting their information. Surely people understand where the majority of people are spending hours and hours of their day, the relationships they're building over the course of the week. Like Joe Rogan has a podcast that's 3 hours-ish per episode every week. Think about who you spend 3 hours a week with that is not your coworker.
Oh my God.
Like, that's the homie.
Yeah.
That's family.
Absolutely.
And like,
it's your group text chain. It's your family. You're exactly right.
Like, that's the bestie.
It's a real community.
And I just kept assuming that people were paying attention to this in the way that we are obviously paying close attention to it in film and TV and in LA. And then I watched this campaign unfold and was just like, oh my God, no one's done it. Like I made this wild assumption. Someone was in charge. Someone was thinking about it.
Well, there's a little bit of, I'm the same, and I'm still in DC.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a little bit of a closer view of this, but I had the same feeling as Twig, which is they're very smart people.
Yeah, which is true.
I trust these very smart people.
Right.
I'm not the only person who knows shit.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are really smart people that know what they're doing. And to be honest, Brad, they did not know what they were doing.
That's right.
They really didn't. And and I still don't think they know what they're doing.
That's right.
And I want to go back to something you just said, though, because you said we need like a wartime DNC chair.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Okay. So when I think about the DNC chair race and when I'm thinking about what needs to happen, I'm going to take y'all on a journey.
Take us.
Are you ready?
I'll sit back.
The Wayback Machine?
Wayback Machine. We're going to go to the halcyon days of 2017.
Yeah, let's
We
go.
can go back further, but I'll just do 2017 because I don't want to be too much of an ass. One of the things that had developed in the immediacy after the first Trump election was everybody took this very wide view of all the things that the party used to do and said, all right, if the party's not going to do it, how do we do it?
Right.
And you got all of these incredible organizations that started, right? I was lucky enough to have a front row seat for a lot of this because I did comms for a bunch of these different organizations back then. And, they're kick-ass and they do really great work.
You're talking specifically, for those who are not aware, of like the resistance bubble.
Yeah, exactly.
In the wake of Trump.
Run for Something.
Yeah.
Indivisible,
Yeah.
The Arena, Sister District, these incredible organizations that had a real perspective on things that were not working and said, we can solve for this problem, and got in there and solved for the problem. Now, that had its pluses and minuses. The pluses were good. That work is now getting done again.
Right.
We're getting candidates recruited for office.
Right.
We're training them. We're resourcing them. We're figuring out interesting ways in how we plug in potential volunteers who are in blue states but want to have effect on red and purple states. Yeah. So like all of that work was great, but it came at an expense. And one of the big expenses was that the party itself, which should have been the one who were doing that work, wasn't doing that work.
Yes.
The problem that caused is that our brand as a party, which was already faltering, now didn't have any teeth behind it. We weren't in the communities because when you're outsourcing when you're outsourcing the
Candidate recruitment.
recruitment,
Really basic.
totally.
Voter reg.
Yes, voter reg. When you're outsourcing all of these things and it doesn't have the Democratic Party's brand behind it, you cease to be a visible fixture of the communities in which people live and in which people are more and more kind of condensing and making smaller because the world feels so big and so unpredictable and hard to understand, right? So our county level folks aren't resourced. Our Democratic clubs aren't resourced. Our state parties are woefully under-resourced.
And then all the youth arms,
and
IDA.
Oh my God,
college
CDA.
bands. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like,
They don't have the money and they don't have the people power to do the work necessary in order to ensure that that peers are talking to peers and community members are talking to community members. We're just not a visible presence.
Yep.
And one of our answers to that, of course, has been we're going to dump $1 billion on TV and digital ads in the last 2 months before an election. But that doesn't work because when somebody in Nebraska doesn't hear from Democrats for 2 or 4 years and then all of a sudden gets a couple of ads served at them, we haven't had a conversation with them about what matters. We haven't built trust with them. We haven't done any of the work necessary to say, yeah, we're Democrats and we understand where you come from. We understand what you're going through. And we actually have solutions to the problems that you are actually facing in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were talking about this backstage. There's so much focus, autopsies, podcasts, and accountability, as should be, on campaigns.
Yeah.
But there's actually more money that's spent outside of campaigns.
Fundamentally, yes.
People don't realize this. All of the political action committees, independent expenditures, nonprofits, C4s, of course we don't count C3s, but C3s count because a lot of the work that's done on voter registration, to your point, Democratic Party just outsources to a lot of these 501c3 nonpartisan groups. And in fact, more money is spent in that ecosystem. And here's the thing, because I have been a part of this industrial complex. That ecosystem shits on Democrats all the time.
Oh, yeah.
That's like the favorite thing to do.
Absolutely.
Favorite thing to do. So, and you go community by community as well. You can go through, when we speak of it's a big tent, we've got all these different constituencies and communities, whether it's the Asian community, the disability community, the African-American community. Those groups love to talk about how the Democratic Party isn't doing the job and we're doing the job that the Democratic Party isn't doing.
Yeah.
And so what you find is even when work is being done, the brand of the Democratic Party, so that's millions, hundreds of millions in some cases, of money that's spent continuing to say the Democratic Party sucks.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Absolutely.
And so how do we fix this? Like, how do we...
Can I offer a different...
Please.
Skew that question a little bit. Because I think that's a whole different discussion. One of the things that I think is actually in order to solve all the problems, I think we're all in agreement that we need different actors to come in and participate in the process. That's part of what we're doing at Twigg and Jenkins is just like,
absolutely,
we could yap about this privately, or we could actually put our own time, expense,
100%.
Thought into trying
and political capital.
Capital into trying to improve the broader ecosystem and to be participatory. We're trying to participate, right? And the DNC chair race and the executive offices races are this sort of first milestone that are going to set the tone. And quite frankly, depending on who gets elected as DNC chair, I think will create desire for further participation or will turn a lot of people off.
That's right.
The last DNC chair race I participated in, I was on Keith Ellison's team trying to get Keith over Tom.
Oh, yeah.
And I really like Tom Perez, and I always have. But I thought that it was so imperative that the DNC find a way to embrace what Bernie had brought into the party. Not a popular idea. But we're now in this moment. There's a contested DNC chair race. One of the things that we've been trying to do by way of interviewing these guys, not just to get to know them as a person, but to like create more opportunities for people to understand how this all works, because it's so obscure in a way.
Yeah.
Can you take a little bit of time to just sort of do some of the nuts and bolts of
Yeah.
like how we elect chair, why we elect a chair, who actually runs the party? Yes, there's staff, but like what are the the broader sort of infrastructure
Absolutely.
of the DNC?
So there are a couple different ways of looking at the DNC. One of the ways in which we look at the DNC is very plainly a series of interconnected bank accounts that allow for national level folks, specifically presidential campaigns, to work. So what folks don't typically realize is that the DNC as an entity is effectively set up to be the thing that the actual presidential race runs through. Now, that's where we stand today. That's been its role for the last several cycles, probably since like 2004, 2008, right? Less in 2008 because OFA was such a big, powerful machine. It was very, very different. But the DNC at root is set up to do that work.
OFA is Obama for America.
And we could almost spend a whole podcast on that decision.
Yes, because that played a huge role in kind of diminishing and defanging the party. Now, the party itself, though, has a bunch of different entities and sub-entities to it. So, like, the first and biggest one that folks need to be aware of is the Association of State Democratic Chairs. This is a coordinating body within the DNC where all of the state chairs and vice chairs really have an opportunity to talk to the national party and to direct the national party in terms of what is needed on the state level. Now, that's where Ken, one of the candidates, comes out of.
Yep.
Ben as well.
And Ben, exactly, as chair.
Ken and Ben.
The Ken and Ben show.
Ken and Ben.
If it doesn't work out for the two of them, maybe they could actually follow up this podcast and do the Ken and Ben show.
They
should.
do the Ken and Ben show.
Seriously.
Yeah. We were saying, Brad,
We absolutely need more white men in the podcast.
I was just going to say, we were... remember when Kamala was searching for her white man, where it was like the white boy summer?
Yeah.
It's now white winter.
Yeah.
It's white boy winter.
This color.
Let's go.
That's what we're doing. Hi.
Ken and Ben.
Yeah, Ken and Ben show. No, so legitimately, one of the reasons why both candidates for chair that we just mentioned, both Ken and Ben, are intriguing to me is because they both come out of that experience.
Yeah.
They come out of the organizing experience of both growing and having to be at the front lines of state party fights. And so when I think about the road forward, which is, addressing that much larger question that we were just talking about, which is what does the party do and how do we take those party building functions back underneath the party? Like both of them, I think, are able to tinker under the hood in order to kind of get at the question or get at the right questions and then get at the right answers to how we do that. What I'm concerned about and what I'm hoping to see from them, though, is an understanding that infrastructure building is the most unglamorous and under-resourced work in our entire movement, because the folks who are really responsible for giving us the money to do the work of the movement have not traditionally valued the infrastructure building pieces to the level that they need to. And so, like, whoever the next chair is going to have to pick a fight with the billionaire class around where we're putting our money and what that money actually needs to be doing. And I'm hoping that, whomever kind of shakes out of the race is going to be the person who can have that fight with those billionaires and say, I know that you don't necessarily understand this work, but you got to trust us that this is the stuff that actually needs to happen.
Right. Okay, so the Democratic Party is led by the chair.
Yes.
State Democratic parties are led by chairs in those states.
Yes.
They all sort of ladder up and coordinate via the
Association
of State Democratic
Yep.
Party Chairs, the ASDC, which met in Arizona a couple days
Mm-hmm.
ago or last week. In addition to the chair,
Mhm.
there's also an executive there are executive offices
That's
of
right.
the party. There are several vice chairs.
There are
There's
4 vice chairs,
four vice chairs.
one of
There's
which is controlled by the ASDC.
one of which gets picked by the ASDC. There's secretary, treasurer,
Mm-hmm.
anything
And that's
else?
it.
And that's it. Okay.
And then you have 450 some odd members who actually are the voting members of the party.
who pick all the chairs and vice
Yes.
chairs with the exception of the ASDC vice chair.
Correct.
So, and that 450-ish is the state chairs, state vice chairs, and then appointed members, some from the states and some from traditional organizations that have long been affiliated with or support the party.
That's
like
right. So
unions and others.
Exactly. And so traditionally, and some are elected, right? There are also
okay.
elected positions that you can run for state committee person,
Right.
right?
Right,
And
right,
then,
right.
and then you can run for national committee person. And actually, you know, as we're talking about kind of the structure, that's one of the pieces that I'm hoping a lot of folks who are our age or younger really start honing in on.
Yeah.
Because it is probably past time for all of us to take these roles very seriously
Right.
and run for them and to start kind of doing the work in our communities to kind of rebuild these things from the ground up, as much as it is the chair and the vice chair and the executive committee making sure that the folks who get elected by their friends and neighbors have the money and the know-how in order to do that work. But yeah,
What do vice chairs do? And
question.
are there any candidates that you know of that are expressing interest?
yeah. So first, the vice chairs are critically important because they have a very active role to play in fundraising, in managing and helping to provide overall leadership for the DNC in order to help the chair set a vision for what it looks like, in order to be the attack dogs on TV that help the chair to really make the case to the American people around what the Democratic Party is. And the folks who inhabit those roles are really going to need to fundamentally redefine those roles. Right now, traditionally, what has occurred is that those vice chair roles have done a lot of work at the behest of the 450 voting members. And I think that that's important. It's important for somebody who's in that role to be a voice for and to assist and to work with the 450 voting members. But it's equally important that these roles are not necessarily just reflexively doing that and are kind of talking about and pushing the party to make the structural changes that it needs to do.
We need real serious people because it
100%.
can't just be a vanity role, which I think occasionally it is and fine.
A lot of times.
in fat times,
Yeah.
but we're in lean times.
That's
and
right.
so we need people who are down to do the work. There's so much work that has to be done.
That's right.
So who's running for vice chair?
So I've been looking at this, and I'll be very honest. I've been thinking about doing it myself.
Let's
All
go.
right.
I've been,
Breaking news on the Twig and Jenkins
yeah.
podcast. Let's go.
Come here for your exclusive.
Let's go. This is what
you
we do.
heard
We're
it
like-
here first,
He's
folks.
like a Woj bomb.
Here we
You
go.
know what I mean? Like, this is a
Woj
Twig and
bombs.
Jenkins bomb, you know?
I to be completely honest, I don't know if I'm going to do it.
What's holding you back?
Well, this microphone.
I was going to
first.
say, why not? Let's go. You just said this is a moment.
It is. I'm afraid.
Ooh.
Ooh.
We love
Vulnerability.
vulnerability
We love
here at
vulnerability.
Twig and Jenkins.
I'm afraid. It's
Let's get into it.
it.
Dig deep.
It's, you know, I've been lucky enough as a staffer, as a consultant, to kind of be one of those people who has been effective in the background and who's kind of like done that work, put my
Yeah.
head down. And it feels very unnatural to kind of put myself out there in this sort of way. So part of this is a real genuine fear in terms of like, am I stepping out into a world that, I know a lot about, but do I really? Am I really ready? Am I really prepared to take on this big, meaty work? I'm also, much like everybody else in our world, I suffer from some imposter syndrome. I don't know if I'm good enough
know
or
anything about
smart
that.
enough. I mean, right? Talk to me, right?
Well, it turns out no one was in charge.
Turns out
no one knew what they were doing. So I don't know how steep the
100 billion%. Now, I've also heard about some other folks who are running for the role.
David Hogue is considering it.
David Hogue is considering it, and a very good friend and ally of mine, Artie Blanco, has just announced.
Longtime
Shasti.
DNC stalwart.
Yes, longtime DNC.
Shasti Conrad.
Shasti Conrad
Yes.
is running. We love Shasti.
Shasti is great. I've been in the trenches with Artie,
Yeah.
and Artie is a wartime vice chair.
Yeah.
So if I were to do it, great. I'm also feeling very, very warm fuzzies about Artie being into the race, because I think that as a fighter and as somebody who kind of understands what the DNC needs, I would feel very comfortable and confident with her being in one of those roles. But, in terms of just me thinking this through, number one, I don't have a lot of time. I gotta really, shit or get off the
Yeah.
pot.
You got to make a decision.
Yeah, I gotta make a decision.
Brad, you're on the pod. That means you're running. Sorry to break it to you. Let's go.
Announcement.
Let's go. No, I'm kidding.
No, I look, I appreciate it, and thank you for
We
the vote of
support you,
confidence.
and we support the
Thank you.
work. The work that you did this cycle with the white dudes
Thank you.
was some of the most innovative, thoughtful, important work. And it's something, we had a very long, one of our more successful episodes of Twig and Jenkins, conversation about how that work continues.
Yeah.
And I think that, look,
and I think, sorry to cut you off.
No, go
honey.
for it.
And an example of identity politics gone really well.
Yeah.
Which we cannot, I don't know how you separate identity from politics. I don't think that that's a real thing. And yet I don't know that we have managed identity politics particularly well. And so as a party. And so I think figuring out how do we continue to organize in a way that allows people to come from the position that's real to them and important to them and helps them make sense of the world. We can have Geminis for DNC. I don't care, but how do people make sense of the world? And the way that we do that is through our identities.
100%.
And so your innovation around that, stepping out and sort of doing that boldly, which we talked about on the past podcast, building all this tech for it, figuring out how to build community and share vulnerably and bring people in, not in just surrogates ways, but that really built parasocial relationships.
Yes.
The party needs so much more of that. And we need it not just for white dudes, we need it for all kinds of people.
Yeah.
I would love your list. I'm kidding.
No.
But, that would be a huge thing to bring into the organizing and planning that the DNC, when it has its new elected body, will go immediately into.
So, first, thank you both. Ross, me, Mike, Sam, Tim, Aaron, the whole crew who really did this. We knew we were doing something special. And we knew that providing a permission structure for white dudes across the country who aren't really necessarily familiar with the Democratic Party in that way, it was incredibly gratifying to see us kind of pierce the Fox News filter bubble. And I know that the other side won, but they were fucking petrified.
Yeah.
Every single time we made a move, we were in their fucking heads.
Yeah.
And honestly, when we're in this position right now, that's what the party needs to be doing, right? The party needs to be in Trump's head, and the party needs to be in the Republican Party's head at all times, making them feel uncomfortable, making them feel insecure, making them feel like they actually have to compete on their grounds in order for us to survive the next 4 years. Number two, lesson learned from this year that speaks exactly to what you were talking about. I think that like folks like you two, folks like me, folks like a bunch of our friends who are working, I think that we might have taken the lesson this time that we've been good soldiers and we have kept our heads down and we've done the work, and that time is over. It is now high time for us to start saying when we disagree with something or when we think something isn't going right, that we need to be full-throated about it and just start moving on it. And the third thing that I'll say, and one of the things that I'm really hoping for, and we said this at the beginning, waiting my entire career, you all have been waiting your entire career for the party to start acting like a party.
Yeah.
And in those 100 and some odd days after Kamala was named our nominee, we saw it, it organically happen, and it was gorgeous and wonderful. And the thing that I am most fearful of is that in the last couple of weeks, finger pointing, lack of accountability, all of the things that we've kind of seen from folks as we've tried to unpack what happened are setting us back from the goal of recreating that. The lesson that we need to take from that last 100 days is that when we are all on the same page, when we are marching in lockstep, when we're doing the right things and we're actually like moving as one, we do make things competitive. Now, the flip side is, hey, guess what? Maybe we need to stop being so damn elitist. Maybe we need to start listening to what people are telling us. When people are hurting, we need to hear that. We need to be able to feel it. And honestly, the people at the top of the party need to be folks who have experienced that economic anxiety, have experienced that fear and pain. Because honestly, just intellectually knowing it or being able to, rattle off a bunch of stats about whether the economy is good or bad ain't getting the job done.
Yeah, totally. I would just push back a little bit and say that the fact that we felt like a party for the last 100 days, basically once Kamala was on the top of the ticket, how good it felt at the convention. The lesson to me to draw from that is how sorely that had been lacking.
Yeah.
I love Joe Biden.
No,
I always
true.
have. But it had been years since we had felt that way, and no one would acknowledge it in any meaningful way, despite the fact that there was report after report. Brad and I talked about this the other night. We were both in Chicago for the 15-year anniversary Obama reunion thing. So many leaks came out of that about how the infrastructure of the campaign was not where people thought that it should be, that there was a lack of enthusiasm and excitement. And that was the press coverage for a year. So we had known for quite some time that we did not have enthusiasm, that there was a lack of party cohesion, that there were fiefdoms, there was a lot of distrust and mistrust, that we also, even so many journalists were like, people do not feel good about the economy. I get it. It's better than what's happening in Europe. I get it. It's better than what's happening in China. And yet people have such diminished purchasing power that they do not feel good. I don't care what's happening with it. Like, we knew all of that, right? And so the massive groundswell of organic enthusiasm that was generated by Kamala Harris becoming at the top of the ticket should have been looked at as a really profound contrast between what we had been doing 2.5, maybe longer years, and what was possible.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Because that enthusiasm, that behavior, that party unity is not what is. It is what was possible. It is what is possible, but it is not what actually existed. It was a fantasy.
And it came out of, I felt like there was a relief.
Yeah.
There was a relief. There was an exhale.
Yes.
And there was an excitement because it was anyone other than the status quo. And that status quo, as we discussed, was like not to be named.
Right.
We're not going to talk about how demoralized
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
we all were for years.
100%.
And so we've gone back to our norm.
Yeah.
yeah.
We have not backslid.
Yeah.
You're right.
That was
I
a
agree.
mirage.
Nope, you're right.
I
That was a
agree.
mirage. Let's not play games. We have to earn that
Yeah.
We have to earn
back.
it.
We
I
have to
you're right.
build towards what we know to be possible. But it was a chimera.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And
But
it's going to take
it's
work.
good to have a mirage.
And it's
Right.
possible.
I
Now we
think
know
that-
it's possible.
Yeah, no, that's what I was gonna say.
Right.
Like that was the biggest, and I know Brad, we got to let you go in a second. Like that was the biggest moment of hope
Yeah.
for me, was how quickly. Because remember how we kept saying like, you know what, if Biden drops out, it's okay.
Correct.
You know what, it might be really exciting. You know, people were
It
so
was.
afraid.
Yes.
People were so afraid, and I think that fear has gripped
Yeah.
the Democratic Party for so long. And I agree with you. This is a moment where we should just be, this is not a time for us to be afraid to do anything. We should try 100 different things.
What have we got to lose?
Really?
What have we got to
We have to. And if we keep doing the same damn thing over and
Yeah.
over again, there's not going to be a party anymore.
No.
It can't continue on like this.
So
it just can't.
speaking of, not to make this about you, because this podcast sometimes become like personal therapy.
Well,
What is there to be afraid of, Brad? You should run. The Twig and Jenkins podcast supports you. I'm
Thank
sure our
you.
supporters support you. I think it would be really exciting, if not just for, I was thinking about all of the candidates we've interviewed for DNC chair. Obviously, they're not all going to win.
Sure.
But each of them is really contributing to the conversation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. More voices, such a good point. More people in the mix trying to stir it up.
I'll be thinking about it.
Yeah.
I'll be making a decision pretty soon. One
Cool.
way or another, I really hope that, there is a place for me to be a positive influence on where this party goes next, because I do care.
Yeah.
I've been doing this. I've invested 25 years of my life into this movement. It's very meaningful to me. And to see where we are right now and to really feel the anxieties of the folks who place their hopes and dreams on our success is really something that I'm taking very seriously. So I hope that we can do something. I really do. I really hope this is our moment
This
to
is our moment.
change things.
This really is our moment. What was the Obama quote he would always say?
Si se
We are the
puede.
ones we've been waiting for.
We are the ones
We
we've
are
been
the
waiting
ones we've
for.
been waiting for.
Cheers to
We
that,
are the
man.
fucking ones we've been waiting for.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
both.
go.
Thank you. It was
Let's go.
great.
Thank you, Brad. Peace, y'all.